I was looking on my favorite app searching for free items when I came across this rather poor looking mower. It was one of 2 mowers they were giving away, and you'll be seeing the other one pretty soon. However, before that happens, we'll need to try and get this one working first. But this one is not going to go without a pretty serious fight, and it may just cost me more of my precious time and money, which is something that a lot of people don't seem to have an abundance of nowadays. In today's video, we're going to be looking at this Bolens lawnmower, and the problem is that I just picked it up and I was told that it's been unused and outside for a very long time. That means more than likely it's not going to start for us, and we need to try and figure out why before we start to throw good money at it. Now, I'm going to try and repair this lawnmower, but yours might be different, so this might not work on yours. So if things are not working out for you, like in the video, please ask about it and I'll be glad to answer your questions. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but keeping a mower outside isn't a terrible thing just so long as you keep it out of the weather. There are other considerations though, such as keeping your tank full or empty while it's outside, which is something we'll talk about here in a bit. The first thing we need to do is to take a look around and see what we're working with. And it looks like there's a full tank of fuel, which is always nice to find, but we'll need to see if it's any good though. Another bit of good news is that it appears the last person to install the air filter did remember to oil it. That means we should be able to clean it and reuse it just so long as it's not coming apart. Now, unfortunately, that bit of good news is going to be offset by some really bad news, which is the situation with the oil, or should I say the lack of it. So after wiping off the dipstick and then taking a reading, it looks like there's no oil on the dipstick. Now, more than likely, there's probably still some oil in it. I don't think it's bone dry, but this news isn't good for this engine. I need to examine the bottom of the engine to see if there might be a leak there, but to do that, I'll need to take off the discharge chute. So what I'm looking for is an oil leak from the seal at the bottom of the shaft, but I don't see any signs of a leak there. I do, however, see where the oil used to be on the mowing deck, so that means there could be a leak coming from the valve cover then. That means when we check on the valve clearances, we can also see if the gasket there is damaged as well. While we're here, we might as well take off the blade for an inspection and sharpening and a balancing as well. Next, what we're going to do is siphon out all this gasoline to inspect it and see if it's any good or if it might be the cause for the engine not starting. And what we find in the fuel tank is a bit surprising because it looks like a lava lamp before you turn it on. So what you're looking at is gasoline floating on top of a lot of water. That's right, more than half of what was inside the tank was water. Now, to be honest, it looks kind of cool, kind of reminds me of something I'd see at sunset on Lake Okeechobee, but I'll leave that story for another day. Another reason why you don't want to leave your mowers outside is the possibility of the cables getting stuck. Of course, if they're not too bad, you can get them freed up again with some lube, but let it go for too long and the cables will eventually rust and break. And for some reason, they had this rope disconnected from its guide on the handle, so I'll put it back on, but on top of that, they also had the guide upside down. Now, you can have it any way that you want to, but with it upside down, the rope has a tendency to rub against the handlebar, which might cause it to wear out and break in the future. Of course, it's not going to break the moment you use it that way. That's the reason why I think sometimes I find these upside down, but I'm going to turn it right side up in the meantime. Before I get too far into this project, I'm going to give it a quick spray and rinse just to get rid of years of dirt and debris that's laying on top of the mower. Now, I did get a very interesting comment about the use of a water sprayer when cleaning these mowers, and to be honest, I don't ever recall it being an issue. Just so long as you're not spraying water directly into the muffler or the area for the filter, it shouldn't be a problem. However, if your mower has a battery or other electronics on it, I would take some extra care when spraying water on it. Now, if you don't want to clean the outside of your mower, you might want to at least consider cleaning the cooling fins on the engine. These fins, working with the engine oil, are the main ways the engine tries to keep itself cool, and if they're covered in grass and dirt, it might cause the engine to wear out faster than it should. Just like cleaning the rest of the mower, this doesn't have to be done very often. But with this lawnmower being almost a decade old, it's a bit past due for a good cleaning. So I want to talk about storing your mower with a full tank versus an empty fuel tank. So the manual says that if you're going to leave it unused for a long time, they recommend on emptying the fuel system. But of course, you're welcome to fill it all the way to the top as well. It is your mower and it's your right to do so. However, if you leave it outside in the weather and more importantly in the moisture, then whenever it rains, condensation in the tank will make its way to the bottom under all that gasoline. And it's going to stay there until the gasoline evaporates, and once it does, then the water will then have a chance to do the same thing. I'm not sure if that's the case here, but it's certainly a good possibility. Next, we're going to take off the valve cover and check the valve clearances along with the gasket for the cover. So I don't think the valve cover was leaking, and that's because it was stuck to the gasket, meaning it's never been taken off. So I do have an idea on how most of the engine oil made it out, but I'll wait before I say what it is, and maybe you'll figure it out before I say it. Now the spark plug looks practically brand new, and I can only guess that maybe it was changed recently in an attempt to try and get it running again. And even though I'm pretty sure the gap is where it needs to be, I'm still going to check it just to make sure someone didn't drop it on accident. Next, I'm going to rotate the engine until one of the rocker arms is all the way down while the other one is loose. Then we'll check the clearance for the one that's still loose. I'll then take my 5/1000ths of an inch feeler gauge and slide it into the clearance and see how it fits in there. But the weird part is that I'm not able to get it into the clearance, meaning it's smaller than the 5/1000ths feeler that I'm using. Next, we'll do the same thing for the other rocker arm that was down after rotating the engine so that it's now the loose one. And as you can see, it's the very same situation here as before. That means I'm going to have to loosen the adjusters and jam bolts to make some adjustments. Now the upper and lower range for this engine is 3 to 6 thousandths of an inch, which means it could be in spec, but it's in the lower range and perfectly fine. But since I'm here, I might as well adjust them to a mid-range value of 5 thousandths of an inch, and that's because that's my default value for most overhead valve engines. If I wanted to, I guess I could try using the 3 thousandths of an inch feeler gauge and see how it fits in the clearance, but my choice is to just make it so the 5 thousandths fits instead. Once the adjuster is loose, slide the feeler gauge into the clearance and then turn the nut until the feeler almost gets stuck. After that, tighten the jam bolt and then go back and check the clearance one more time just to make sure. Once the clearances have been set, we can then replace the valve cover and the screws along with the spark plug and the wire. Then we're going to go check and see just how much oil was left in the engine, and then I'll tell you what I think happened to it. So what I think happened was that this mower was kept with the rear of the mower up in the air. What happens is that the oil is pushed against the back of the piston, allowing the oil to seep past the rings. The oil then makes its way into the combustion chamber, then past any valve that might happen to be open, and in this case I think the valve that was open was the exhaust valve. The oil then fills the muffler and then escapes out of the openings, and then it makes its way onto the mowing deck. Now after cleaning the foam air filter, you can see that it's in okay shape, but it is beginning to break apart, so it'll need to be replaced. So finally, we're going to take off the fuel system and drain the last bit of water from it, along with checking to see if the main jet is clogged. So you might be asking why I even bothered to check the valve clearances when we didn't even get the engine started, which I hate to admit is a valid question. The answer is good maintenance. Most times I would recommend a valve check every 3 to 4 years, and with this one being almost a decade old, it was way past due just like the cleaning was. I do want to show you that you can drain the contents of the fuel bowl by using a large Allen wrench. Just turn it a quarter turn, and then if you want to, you can take out the plug as well. After that, carefully pry the bowl free from the rest of the carb, and then we can see the important parts of the carb. So this brass piece is the main fuel jet, and it is the primary passage for fuel to make its way through the carb. Now, even though it does look pretty clear, it may not be as clear as it needs to be to allow the carb to deliver enough fuel to the engine. So this is what it looks like after a very brief cleaning, and if you can't tell how much better it looks, here's a side-by-side before and after the cleaning. Believe it or not, that small difference is enough to keep an engine from starting and running. Also, not having water in the fuel tank helps as well. Next, we need to pop off the white plastic cartridge and then take it apart so we can examine all of its openings as well. Now, if you see what you think is an opening, use some wire, compressed air, or some carb cleaner on it. And if you have an ultrasonic cleaner for jewelry or watches, you can also put these parts in there as well. So here's the issue. If you cleaned up every opening and then put the carb back together and then the engine still won't start or it won't stay running, you have two choices. You can either take it apart again and then go through it again, or you can just replace it, which is what I'd recommend doing. It could potentially save you a lot of time and, more importantly, keep you from having a huge headache. Also, check and make sure that the black O-ring and the white plastic retainer are still on the back of the carb. And if they're not, more than likely they're probably still on the intake pipe on the engine. Also, when you put the fuel bowl back on the carb, just be very careful that you don't install it crooked, otherwise it might not allow the carb to work like it should. Now once the screws are tight, take a look around the carb and make sure that one side of the bowl is not any further away from the carb than the other side is. Next, we'll reconnect the fuel line and put the carb and tank back on the engine. Now you can decide if you'd like to install the tank and carb separately, but I will let you know that doing it this way will be a bit more difficult. The main reason why is because the fuel line is extremely short and difficult to connect to the ports while the carb and fuel tank are in place. I know this looks like a lot of work, but in reality, it turns out this is the better option. You don't need to take my word for it. In fact, try it both ways and see which one you like best. Next, I'm going to install a new air filter which was bought in bulk, making it very cheap, but before I install it, I'm going to put some lube on it. So here's the deal. I use lube in a can for this part, but you're welcome to use any sort of lube you want. Just be aware that if you use something that's very thick, it'll mean that you'll need to clean it more often, which is why I use this one. It does a great job of capturing dirt, but it's not going to clog up as fast, so I only have to clean it once a year depending upon how much I use the mower. Next, I'm going to install the blade that I sharpened and balanced. Making sure it's balanced will not only keep the vibrations down, but it should also extend the life of the engine. And the last things that we have to do are to replace the engine oil and pour in fresh 100% gasoline with no ethanol in the fuel tank and then try and start it. So it's been running for about 5 minutes. That means the engine is close to normal temperatures. Let's try and start it again and see how it does. Unfortunately, it didn't start, which is not good at all. Next, we'll try priming the engine and see if that helps out. So this time, after priming it, the engine started up with no issues. That means we have a fuel issue from the carb. So this is the very situation I was talking about before. I can either go through the carb again and try to save $12 but use up more of my precious time, or just cough up the money. You also saw smoke come out of the muffler on startup. That's a result of the engine oil that was still in the combustion chamber burning after startup. At least we won't have to worry about an oil leak coming from the engine, which is great news. That means we just need to make a decision on the carb, and then we should be ready to do an extensive test on it. Only then will it be ready for sale. So my question is, would you try and save some money and go through the carb again, or would you rather just buy a new aftermarket carb for $12 and save all that time instead? Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.